not alone. We still are in direct contact with those that are working with us, I'd say more than using us as far as extraterrestrials are concerned. So, yeah, I get a little uptight sometimes whenever people are talking. All of a sudden they get yanked off, and we've had it happen here several times tonight, CJ, because we know well that we're being monitored, and if any of our guests seem to be going in a direction that they don't want us to have, and we're right now at a point of getting into full disclosure, and I've been involved a lot here in the last, really, I guess it's a year more, that getting disclosure out, making it easier for people like yourself to come forward and start telling your side of the true stories. And that's, TJ, I think that we're going to be seeing a lot more public direct contact before the end of the year 2019. So 2020 is going to be a really exciting year. I'm looking forward to it. Okay.
I believe that's right. Go ahead, Kimberly.
Well, what I was going to say was I've been warned several times from people from the Netherlands and from people from the UK for me to stop talking about things so much, for me to, not talk about the UFOs, to start keeping a lower profile. I've had referrals to a German physicist contacted me and said that he was referred to me by somebody, but never told me as to who. And he was doing a talk and doing papers on UFOs, but he had no belief system in the UFOs, and I thought that was ironic, being a German physicist to start with and not believing. Well, I worked with him for like 2 weeks, and he changed his mind after that. But there's just so much. I get a lot of people that that want proof. Well, if you're abducted, they don't have just like I tell them, they don't have a damn gift shop that you can pick up a damn keychain or a bumper sticker. They just don't have that. And even if they did, would you really believe it even then? What do they want? There's no possible, unless I chain a UFO to my wrist and drag it in, are they going to believe it then? There's too many sightings we've had. Right, exactly. And I get kind of uptight, and because this is personal to me, because it happened personally. So it becomes a much different level than if you're just talking about a subject that you don't have any personal connection to. So it becomes a little bit on a different level of things.
And I've always put a positive spin on mine, and that's I had Janet with the Love and Light crew for me with my Ascension Center, and Tommy with my dark arts and Harry Potter, because he had been a wizard and a warlock and had his own coven in Jersey and done Vegas shows and been on television and, knew the business really good. So I figured he could help me with all these people that have the problems. But I had gone through a lot of work, not just being born and dead or born and crossover, depending on who you talk to, because you offend you don't want to offend anybody with your words.
You're going to offend everybody.
Somebody. So, whether I tell my truth or try to make it sound good for all my love and light workers, which if I have to work in fear, I've seen people in love, and I'm going to be 68, and there's those out there that lead from the brain in their heart and their gut. And when I was an investigator, and I came close to losing my life many, many times, whether it was drowning or at gunpoint or out of country or starving or in snowstorms or stuck in a big truck, up on a mountain with nobody coming up there. I've been so close to death so many times, but the times that I did pass, I was brought back as late as my husband died, and I died that same day, but they brought me back on a gurney in the ER room, and the guy said, I said, you know what I have? He says, yeah, and I said, well, have you seen other people with it? He said, yep, but they didn't live to tell about it. So He didn't tell me anything. He walked out. He was just, there's 3 or 4 doctors that had already been called in at the end, and the chaplain sitting next to me and picked my iron up, dropped it, and I watched it, and I sort of overhead. But it's so funny how many times I've been able to leave my body, but they keep sending me back. So I figure, okay, if we're going to do this, I'm going to do this together, because I've been working on this since I guess I was born. And Kimberly, you'll learn I was taken, and I saw angels had hepatitis and went out of my body, and they put some blood in me. So that's like a hospital thing. You know, people say, yeah, I could figure that. That's nurses would tell you, yeah, that's possible. Then I went over to White Sands, New Mexico, and saw my uncles working at Los Alamos, and so I figure that's part of my family with ETs. Anyway, after that, I married a guy at NASA and went back to Houston. That's where Ken comes in, and we meet a lot of the same people with Grumman. And then my husband's dad worked at Grumman Aerospace, and then the Jim Oberg, he said, worked over in engineering. But he couldn't come to like 2014. I was there 67 through 76 when I went to University of Alabama. My husband moved to Southern Company Services, electric company, and I worked for Southern Living Magazine right next door, Decorating Craft Ideas. So we were right next door. It was really convenient. While I went to University of Alabama, finished some of my investigation forensics. But I've never met a mad painter. I've never met Tommy Hawksblood, and I have met one guy here, Kimberly. The one guy is Ken R. Johnston, and when I met him, he had just got back from India, and so we met in 2017, but he had been on my show 2 years before that. And then we talked about a book that William Tompkins did, and Ken brought his copy. He had just gotten that. Ken, you remember anything in your brain remembers May 9th and 10th in Mobile, Alabama at all about us meeting? He had a car wreck after this, so he has trouble.
Yep. I do, as a matter of fact. But one thing I'd like to jump in and give you a chance to go into, because we get people contact us and everything else, and we're told about, well, T.J. Norris was part of the CIA, and we all have some background and experiences, and so I don't know. I tell everybody, well, if she did, then she's not with them anymore. So is that a valid subject matter to bring up, or your research and activities and things? Were you at one time involved with the CIA? Or did I step on toes in making a change in the subject here? I didn't mean to.
Who are you asking, Kimberly or me?
Oh, I'm asking me, you.
I'm retired as of 2017, but I was brought into the government without knowing it, but I signed all the paperwork on May 10th, 1967. And so apparently that was my first clearance with the government. But, Ken, we don't say intelligence agencies, and nor would they have brought a 16-year-old kid in, but they do. They just like they do at ROTC and get you ready for high school. I found out later. But, yeah, I met a Men in Black. They came to I was twirling machetes and fire batons. And so this long story is really interesting. But, yeah, I know now that I was, but, yeah, I went to put in for the Central Intelligence Agency knowingly back in the day, later on, 20 years later, and 87, and was there to the day, which I find funny, but May 10th, 1987, never even put all this together until I meet my husband. That he said his CIA handler brought him my file, which back in the day was a hard copy, folks. And he said it was a very thick file, 2.5 inches. And he saw me in a blue dress, and I was at a country club. And I'm not going to tell you all the story, because the basic idea is, yes, I went into intelligence, Ken. And if you want to say intelligence agencies, I dated U.S. Secret Service. I dated agents. I dated NIS agents. I dated FBI agents. And, yes, I was one of those girls that was like a Miss James Bond, because that's the guy that Rick Allen Miller talks about with the cigarette, Men in Black. That's when I was right out in Houston, right outside that Windsor. There were steps on the side, and they met me and Stephen Lee Parrish, and Steve wound up working for NASA. And I didn't understand when I had to fill out the paperwork because I'd already had it filled out. And they said I'd already had it, but it was 5 years. They needed the 5 years from 16 till before Stephanie was born, so they had to put my paperwork back in at NASA. So from 67, they had me. And 50 years, in 2017, I retired. So 50 years serving our government on paper. But now, here's the complication part. I wore a uniform for the United States Navy. I wore the Air Force uniform. I wore a black uniform. I wore an Army uniform. I wore a Marine uniform. The only one I did not wear was a Coast Guard uniform. And the only paper I was taken into a basement on several times. I don't know what the government has about the basements. I guess they're below ground, but that's where they do most of their talking. And you'll notice even in the White House, they have a room underneath. And we have all kind of places underneath the cities, you know, for people to get to and from, including Houston. There's been many times I've been under Houston going to the courthouse. But I've done all kind of investigations on paper, on people in and out of country. I was proud of my work that I did. But do you know what? I do know the difference of when I was a child, when I died, when I was conscious. I do know the difference when you're unconscious, when you dream, when you have lucid dreams, when you're in the astral plane, when you're in the etheric, you know, out there wherever you are. And so I learned a lot. But I think that the reason I think I got called in, number one, it was a prime time to go to space. And number two is we lived in the NASA area. But I think some of the government guys that kids went to school with me just saw me twirling batons and fire batons and machetes, Ken, and I think I was talented. But still, even if you work for the government in uniform or out, because you worked in a Marine uniform, and Tom didn't know he worked for the CIA while he was working for the Army, and then he would be assigned to other jobs. Now, if you ask me, somebody came up and told me, no. But yes, one time the NIS said I was really good at what I did. That's the Naval Investigative Services. So, and that was after I did JAG investigations, because they wanted me to admit what I did, and I never did to anybody. But now that I'm no longer in, I'm retired, I'm out here, and yeah, I've seen guys with CIA cards, but I wasn't a card carrying, as they say, CIA agent. I would be called. Actually, I was never called anything.
I get called a lot of things.
Ahmed, you've got the book. How would you, if you had to explain to Ken what I did, or to Tommy or anybody, what would you say? You've got the original book. What would you say?
You were just an investigator that, you know, they used.
There you go, Ken.
I got you. And that's really what has happened to a lot of us, many of us, is that we have been used. And but hopefully it's all been for ending up in a very positive manner to where we are taking our place amongst the galaxies and the universe. And I've been excited to find out that a lot of the things that I wound up doing would prove the fact that we when we went to the moon back in 1969, we had already been there, as well as on Mars. And I've got now pictures and copies of the pictures that I kept that before they'd been doctored up, which shows bases and things on these locations. So that'll allow the debunkers to really go after it and say, oh boy, he is crazy. He's telling really fact lies and stories. But all you've got to do is be able to get a hold and take a look at some of the pictures, do your own research. Oh, well, that's a thing I tell everybody. Don't listen to the crap you hear from so many different sources. Do your own research and check it in, and you'll know which part is true and what is false. So
that's what I preach too.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go to the source, folks. Go to the source.
That's the thing.
Tommy?
Yes.
Kim,
Hi,
I want you to get to know Tommy. So, however that's supposed to be. But, all right, Tommy, just for a minute, I don't know what you'd call me either, but Kimberly's, this is the first 24 hours. So, Tommy, if you can put her mind to rest a little bit about working with us, I'd appreciate it, because I know that weighs heavy on Ken's mind about the CIA, because he's almost not worked with me a couple of times, Ken, and I know it keeps bugging you because Ken and I have mutual